In brutual Assyrian Empire, strength defined men, while weakness, or anything that resembled it was hunted down like disease. But what the Assyrians feared most wasn't an army or rebellion. It was something they believed could rot a man from the inside. Softness. In ancient Assyria, to be labeled feminine wasn't an insult, it was a death sentence. Not necessarily by sword, but by something slower and more terrifying. Punishment didn't come only from kings or courts, it began with culture. In public, such men were humiliated, they were stripped of their honor, mocked, and in some cases, forced to wear women's clothing as a form of degradation, not as identity, but as insult. This wasn't just about mocking them, it was about turning them into a symbol of what not to be. Religious institutions also played a role. In Assyria, masculinity was tied to the gods, the king was seen as a representative of divine order, strong, masculine, and fearless. A man who didn't match that ideal was seen as spiritually polluted. Priests and temple guards viewed softness in men as a sign of imbalance, even bad luck. Some were barred from rituals. Others were forced to perform degrading tasks meant to correct their behavior. The law codes, though vague in modern translations, made it clear, a man who dishonored his gender role could be beaten, disfigured, exiled, or enslaved. The goal was not just to punish him but to erase the traits he represented. The Assyrians, a gentleman was not harmless, that he was dangerous, a crack in the armor of their society, and they sealed that crack with public shame, legal violence, and religious silence. The Assyrians believed that punishment should be seen, not hidden. Justice wasn't served in silence, it was staged. And when it came to men who defied the expected image of masculinity, humiliation was often more important than pain. For men accused of softness, the punishment wasn't just about correcting them, it was about broadcasting a warning. Public displays were carefully orchestrated. A man labeled as feminine might be dragged into the center of a marketplace or paraded through the streets. There, he would be stripped of any masculine symbols, armor, beard, weapon, or belt, and replaced with garments associated with women, not to affirm him but to shame him. The act was symbolic. By dressing a man like a woman, Assyrian society wasn't giving him another identity, it was stealing his current one. He was declaring, this is not a man anymore. In some cases, makeup was applied. Jewelry was added. He was turned into a caricature, exaggerated for ridicule. Crowds would jeer, soldiers might spit, and children were encouraged to mock. It wasn't just about degrading the man, it was about entertaining the people. Sometimes these men were forced to serve in roles seen as disgraceful, cleaning animal stalls, carrying chamber pots, or sweeping temple courtyards barefoot, wearing clothes designed to invite ridicule. In more extreme cases, tattoos or branding were used. Marks were burned into the skin across the face, the hands, or the chest. These weren't random symbols, they were permanent labels: weak, soft, disobedient, marks that ensured the man would never regain his place in society. This wasn't justice. It was a ritual. A calculated, repetitive process designed to erase honor, manhood, and voice, not just from the man but from the memory of him. For the Assyrians, the worst thing a man could be was not a criminal or a traitor but a disappointment to his gender, and they made sure the world knew it. What did feminine mean to the Assyrians? Assyrian society didn't tolerate gender ambiguity. A man was expected to be dominant, assertive, and physically strong. Anything less, a soft voice, gentle mannerisms, refined clothing, or emotional expression could be enough to mark him as suspicious. The idea of a man being passive, submissive, or nurturing was not just mocked. It was seen as a threat to the social fabric. Such men were labeled as unnatural, impure, and morally weak. But most dangerous of all was any suggestion of same-sex desire. Even if a man was only rumored to have relations with another man, especially in a receptive role, he could be condemned. While the Assyrian state punished softness in men with public shame and brutality, a strange contradiction lived quietly inside their temples. Among the sacred spaces of cities like Nineveh and Ashur, there existed a class of individuals who openly defied the strict lines of gender and yet were tolerated, even revered, under specific roles. These were temple servants, sometimes referred to in ancient texts as Asinu or Kurgara, male-born individuals who dressed, spoke, or acted in ways that blurred masculine norms. Unlike the common man, these figures were believed to hold a special spiritual role. In the cults of powerful goddesses like Ishtar, femininity in men was not always condemned, it was seen, paradoxically, as a form of divine transformation. These temple attendants were allowed and in some cases required to perform with soft voices, graceful movements, and even feminine garments. Their identity was sacred, not social, and yet, outside temple walls, those same traits could lead to humiliation or punishment. It was a paradox the empire never fully resolved. On one hand, the state punished softness in the streets. On the other, it preserved it in temples as long as it served the gods. This duality reveals something deeper. That the Assyrians didn't fear femininity itself, they feared it outside of control. Within the temple, softness had a place, a purpose, and boundaries. Outside it was chaos. The Assyrians were both protected and alienated. They held spiritual power, yet they were never truly accepted into mainstream masculinity. Their presence proved that the empire made exceptions, but only when it could contain the consequences, and for the average man, there was no such sanctuary. No temple would save him from the weight of society's expectations, because softness, unless blessed by the gods, was treated as a curse. The cruelty of Assyrian punishment didn't end with the act. It continued in silence, in the stares, the whispers, and the isolation that followed. Once a man was marked as feminine, his social death began. Even if he survived the humiliation, he didn't return to normal life. He was no longer a soldier, a merchant, a husband, or a citizen. He was a cautionary tale. This wasn't just physical punishment, it was psychological warfare. Every part of Assyrian culture was built on hierarchy and fear. A man who failed to meet the masculine standard was treated as though he had failed the entire state. His family bore the shame, his name was avoided. In some cases, his records were scratched from official tablets as though he never existed. The damage was deep and permanent. These men were denied marriage, children, and inheritance. In a society where legacy meant everything, that was worse than death. Without sons, a man's name died. Without land, he had no future. Without respect, he became invisible. Even those who tried to correct their behavior faced a lifelong burden. The stigma didn't fade. People remembered how they walked, how they spoke, how they had once worn a dress or been paraded through the streets. The punishment outlived the sentence. What made it worse was the silence. Assyrian texts rarely mentioned the victims by name. No records of forgiveness. No second chances. The message was simple: if you want to be treated like a man, you must never stop proving it. The true weapon wasn't the whip or the brand. It was the gaze of society turning a living man into a ghost. And in the brutal logic of the empire, that was the most effective punishment of all. The Assyrian Empire has long vanished, its palaces collapsed, its kings forgotten, but the fear it planted in the hearts of men lingers through time. A fear not of war, but of softness. Of appearing delicate. Of stepping even slightly outside what power said a man should be. These ancient punishments weren't just historical facts, they were a system of control. A weaponized vision of masculinity, enforced with ritual and cruelty. And while Assyria is gone, its shadow survives. In every culture that mocks emotion, silences gentleness, or turns vulnerability into shame, the ghost of Assyria still whispers. History doesn't always punish with whips and fire, sometimes it punishes with silence.